the end would have been stroking me.
Yeah, and then the thing is, it's like...
Diesel Porsche is like offensive.
Amazing. Come on, then we'll start. Fucking hell.
Oh, synchronicity.
Yeah, absolutely. We've both got the clap.
Yeah, that was slightly just natural one.
Hi, welcome to the latest episode of VoltsMonster
Here we go again.
Interactive. With me today are...
Me.
I forgot what his name is. Virgil.
Virgil.
Yeah.
So I'll start there again. Hi, welcome to the latest edition of VoltsMonster Interactive. With me today are Virgil on the end, the pirate, and gorgeous halves. On the show today, we've got a number of interesting stories. We've got a letter from another person who's written into us. It's warming up. You're all going to be intrigued about.
So it's warm in here.
Oh, it is warm, yeah. But the story today involves a lesbian
Amazing.
who lives in Brighton, unsurprisingly, and a toilet. But anyway, we'll come on to that a bit later on.
Interesting.
Sounds a bit dirty. A bit filthy. Sounds it.
Well, public toilets are always a bit
Yeah,
dirty.
yeah. I mean, lesbians.
You're reading too much into that.
It does. Yeah.
You 20-something-year-olds who are obsessed with lesbians,
Sounds a bit
aren't
like
you?
cottaging or something.
Remember that lesbians aren't interested.
Yeah, that's the thing. Unfortunately.
No matter how big your muscles are,
Yeah, they're
they
not interested.
do not give a
I
toss.
know. They only care about people that look, girls that look like boys. So that's all they care about.
Yeah, which is a bit weird, isn't it?
It is
I've always
weird,
thought it was a bit weird.
yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole different, that's a whole new kettle of fish.
Yeah.
Or in the words of the potato men, fish paste and strawberry jam. But anyway, we'll come on to that later. You're gonna have to work that out, aren't you? It's gone completely over half. But anyway,
I don't know.
don't look at Virgil.
Yeah.
And we've got some interesting stories, and we're going to name and shame some mainstream media who just make up stories to suit their narrative.
Yep.
We're also going to look at some things that are wet, not lesbians. But welcome to the pirates' world. Wetness. I don't think there's any seals involved in it this week.
Not this week.
And if we go to Harvey's is basically inside the mind of a teenager that hasn't quite got there. So, but we'll see. So, where are we going to start? Are we going to start with Harvey's? You put Harvey's on the script?
Yeah,
All right, well, let's start with Harvey's.
It's a 2-minute video.
This is on TikTok. It's a 2-minute video, and it's probably some middle-aged journalist ranting about something. Is that right?
Yeah, probably. Again, I watched about 20 seconds of it, so.
What is your perspective on EVs?
They're not nearly as good on carbon as people think. Most of the data that exists doesn't take into the fact that most of this stuff is processed in China where it's all coal-driven.
Right, let's just stop it there. Right? He has just said he's an American, let's be honest, American, where he criticises most things in China of being coal-driven. Well, China is currently building...
I think they're building more renewable energy sources than
They've
any country in the world, I think.
So last year, they've just completed more solar generation than the whole of the rest of the world put together. Right? So look, it's easy to diss the Chinese, right? But let's be honest, America isn't exactly carbon free, is it? He's sitting there arguing that an EV might be a bit shit because it's made in a country that has a coal-fired power station. How many coal-fired power stations have the Americans got? Anyone any ideas?
Quite a few, I'd imagine. I'd say.
I actually don't know the number. I thought I'd ask, but
I'd say you could, anyway, looking at his polyester shirt and blazer, I'd say there's a fair bit of oil and fossil fuels has probably gone into the manufacture of that.
And
Oh,
it
there you
doesn't
go.
does not take into account the fact that most grids that they run on are also majority fossil fuels. And that extends the break-even time for carbon from 1 year to either 5 or 10 based on what model you're talking about. Cybertruck's far worse than EVs. But the bigger problems, we're just not going to be able to make them much longer. If we really do want to electrify everything, that doesn't just mean EVs, that means the entire system that feeds into the EVs. We need twice as much copper and 4 times as much chromium and 4 times as much nickel and 10 times as much lithium and so on. We have never, ever, in any decade in human history, doubled the amount of a mainline material production in 10 years, ever. And we need all of this by 2030? No. It's just not.
Let's just stop this here, right? The problem with people who make these statements is they forget that it's not everyone has to buy an EV by 2030, right?
Mm-hmm.
The actual adoption period, is it not? The next 50 years, it's like 2050. And he's totally mistaking.
Mistaken the fact that you're phasing the back, not that that's the target, you've got to have EVs.
Absolutely.
Right.
So look, let's put a positive spin on this, right? The reality is 80% of all the cars that are bought in the UK and in the US are used.
Mm-hmm.
That means petrol and diesel cars are going to be around for 100 years or more. I met a lady once in a petrol station, not that way, right? And she was driving, this is about 10 years ago, and she was driving to go on her annual holiday in a 105-year-old Rolls Royce, right? It was actually just on the A38 petrol station,
Okay, yeah.
right? Amazing. There isn't 100-year-old planes, although the B-52 might be 100 years old by the time it leaves service, but generally speaking, most things won't last 100 years, and we will still have petrol and diesel cars in 100 years. Mark my words. I'll be there, and I'll prove it to you.
I hope so. Because I don't really like EVs. So
Well, yeah, but you're
it's just like a bit naff.
but you're like a woke.
A bit naff though.
Well, it depends on the EV. A Rimac isn't naff at all.
Yeah, but it doesn't make a noise or anything.
It does make a noise.
It doesn't.
It
It
does
doesn't make a noise like a petrol.
And what I can say about Rimac, if you were in the passenger seat of Rimac and I was driving, you'd be making all sorts of noises.
Yeah, I can imagine. But then that's
Mark would have had a stroke,
Yeah.
and probably Virgil at the
It's
end
just-
would have been stroking me.
Yeah, but then the thing is, it's like I don't know. I don't like the idea of it. So it's just a bit naff, especially now at the moment. Maybe in a couple of years it won't be, but I just think the majority of them are a bit naff.
Really?
Yeah. Like I wouldn't, if I had the money to, obviously I don't know, but if I had the money to choose between an EV or petrol diesel, I'd just get petrol diesel.
You go for the petrol diesel.
Yeah, I wouldn't get an EV.
Amazing.
I'd rather a petrol diesel, like
No.
Porsche at the same sort of level.
No, you wouldn't.
I'd rather a Taycan.
I would have a Taycan over any
Okay.
diesel Porsche.
Really?
Yeah. If you bought a Porsche,
Amazing.
you either buy a petrol one or you
Yeah.
buy an electric one.
Electric,
Yeah.
Diesel,
Go for a diesel.
diesel
Okay,
Porsche.
well, yeah, petrol.
I'm sorry,
That's what
but
I mean, I
diesel
like petrol.
Porsche,
Anything but the EV.
diesel
alright.
Porsche is like offensive,
Okay. Yeah.
right? And that's why if you go online and you want to buy a used Porsche, that's why the diesel ones are all dirt cheap.
Dirt cheap. Yeah, yeah.
So, but anyway, let's move on from these irritating middle-aged people who know nothing about anything and misstate things. Whose account was that on?
No one does anything.
Oh no, someone reposted it.
Yeah.
So,
No one does anything but Joe Rogan.
oh, that was Joe Rogan, isn't
Yeah.
it? Obviously, Joe Rogan is an interesting guy. So, we're going to one of my stories, are we now?
Go on up next.
Okay, so this is a prime example of mainstream media, and I'm not a sort of silver head wearing kind of guy. This is Reuters, Bloomberg. I think it was broken by the New York Times, and they have completely misrepresented the situation. And I can say that I've got a source who's very close to Hertz, and the reality of this article is the headline is Reuters, rental giant Hertz dumps EVs, including Teslas for gas cars. So they basically reprinted someone else's story, firstly, and it's really sloppy journalism. But the actual reality of this is that Hertz have had a massive falling out with Tesla, because up until a day before Tesla cut the retail prices of its cars by 30%, they were still selling Teslas to Hertz.
Don't care, still don't care. I don't care.
That collapsed the value, the used values, because obviously used values are related to new values, and it caused Hertz to have to write off or write down $248 million worth of Teslas that it bought. It didn't do the same thing with Polestars, for example. They still have Polestars on their fleet, they still have a majority Tesla fleet, but they've turned round to Tesla and said, we're not going to buy any more of your cars unless you guarantee that you're not going to do this again. That's not what the article says. Right? And actually all of the vehicles that they're off defleeting, they were going to defleet anyway. So, because most of them had over 80,000 miles on them, which proves they're being used. Being used massively.
It's interesting because some of the articles that I'd seen related to the stories were saying that the reason why Tesla are getting rid of some of their fleet and was primarily because they weren't being used. There was no demand for them. So if there's no demand, then why are they high mileage vehicles? That
exactly. And most rental companies defleet their cars at about 30,000 miles. So it shows they're being used, and it does irritate me that there is a level of misrepresentation by certain news outlets on what the real story is. And obviously Hertz haven't come out and defended it. I think they've tried to just weather the storm, if you like, because obviously the Barbra Streisand effect comes into play here. The more you say, the more you can't make it go away. But fundamentally, misrepresenting. How do we feel about that?
I wouldn't say, it's just kind of expected from the usual EV ne'er-do-sayers and ne'er-do-wells and haters, but I don't know if it's going to have that big of impact. I was chatting literally the day the story broke, was speaking to an auto parts manufacturer in Cyprus, and they quoted the story, and their view was like, well, that's the US, not the rest of the world. Not everywhere is the US, and the whole world doesn't revolve around the US and the state of play and status there. So their view very much of this company in Cyprus is that their EV adoption is growing. The government is, unlike other Western countries or Western governments, the government in Cyprus is actually investing in the EV infrastructure, and they see it as a very positive move forward. I don't think it's going to have that bigger impact on the market.
Yeah, and I think they quote in this that most EVs are trading in the used market about half their starting ticket price, but so do most other cars. And that has not changed.
It's time to stop.
Look,
It's time to stop, okay? No more.
That's what a lot of people
obviously, on this particular story, it does say that the reporting was by Nathan Gomes, Akash Siram in Bengaluru, wherever that is, Joe White in Detroit. So it took nearly 7 people to edit a story
And get it wrong.
and actually get it wrong. It's amazing.
That's a good team effort.
So,
Some
but
solid
look,
chemistry there.
Hertz is leading the market in this space, and we obviously have conversations with different car rental companies, and this is just not the story, and this is not the message that even they are giving out. So well done Reuters, Bloomberg, and the rest of you for literally
Bastardising.
printing someone else's story which you didn't write and getting it completely wrong.
Yeah.
and trusting the journalism. Surely in journalism college they teach you that you actually need to have reliable
Check the
sources
sources.
and proper, like we do.
We do.
So this sort of brings us neatly onto my second story, which is it was broken by Colin Walker, and it's actually a review. Colin Walker at Colin Walker 79. He's on X or Gigawank or whatever it is, and obviously he shouts about various electric vehicle stuff. Some of it positive, some of it negative. But he, is what it is. But the actual report is called, I think it's called Road to 2025 or 2035. Road to 2035. And what Auto Trader are saying is the sort of summary of it is that average EV sales have increased. Obviously, the total adoption of EVs is up in 2023 over 2020.
Stop talking.
It's about 300,000 vehicles in total. There is a tailing off in registrations in December, but it makes the point that, and I do have evidence of this, is that one of the points it makes is a lot of car manufacturers, particularly in the UK, have delayed delivering cars to people until January the 1st, because starting in January the 1st there's an incentive. Well, it's not an incentive, it's a big stick.
It's a big stick,
that the UK government has applied to car sales, that the average car manufacturer has to sell 22% of its cars as EVs. So we've seen lower registrations in November and December, which is likely then pushing them back to January 1st, because that's when it starts. There's also, it points out, and you'll have seen stories in the press where they were going, oh, look how bad Tesla's sales are in November and December. Well, that's because the ship got delayed. And actually the ship arrived 2 days ago, I think, in Bristol. So what were December's cars are actually getting delivered in January. So I wouldn't, overall, you can't read too much into it. Obviously, it converts 315,000 vehicles. So, as I've said many times that by the end of this year, there will be 2.5 million EVs on the road. I absolutely stand by that, and I'll actually have a bet with you. Who wants to have a bet with me?
I'm not putting any money on that one.
You're a pussy.
Really? Okay. So
it's interesting though that the government shifted their target for adoptions of EV in this country. So as a public-facing thing, but then to the vehicle OEMs and manufacturers, they've still applied the big stick and just said, if you don't meet your targets, then we're going to beat the crap out of you for it. Which is a little bit disingenuous.
Well, it's cheaper than in giving a grant to someone to encourage them to buy a new piece of technology. But overall, what we have seen is in the used market, the number of people who are buying second-hand EVs has gone up. And also from a myth-busting point of view, that your car will catch fire and you'll have to put a new battery in it and all that sort of stuff in it. We've now seen that the adoption within the second-hand market has increased dramatically. But that's probably due to there's a lot more supply. Yeah. So if you go back 18 months, there's a lot less cars. So prices are under pressure, but supply and demand. The more vehicles that are in the market, yes, it will be softer. But it's not a crash. It's not like prices haven't crashed. They haven't tanked. You would probably see bigger falls in cars that have keyless entry, particularly Range Rovers, stuff like that, than you would in this. So, interesting report.
It's a very big report.
Like there's one statement there that 3 to 5 year old electric vehicles sold 10 to 15 days faster than their petrol or diesel equivalents. They're big headlines, but if you put that into mainstream media, it's not permeating through.
Interesting looking at figures for plug-in hybrids. If there was that mistrust of the market, you would imagine that the plug-in hybrid market sales would increase, but they
look how stable
stay static, whereas electric has done reasonably well.
You know, overall, electric has sold more cars than diesels as well. So, look, you might even find there might even be more electric cars than petrol cars in that. I haven't done the maths, but fundamentally, report worth looking at. Yeah, pricing is under pressure. As you can see in that used vehicle thing. But you might find in certain vehicles it's much worse. Anyway, positive story.
Yeah.
Talking of which, we're on to
my story.
a bit miserable Virgil's story, who's brought up this again.
Yeah. So Ford is cutting its Lightning production yet again as the demand is failing.
I was talking to one of the he was one of the heads of Ford at SEMA.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest problems that the F150 has over the say Rivian as a equivalent truck is that they were directly targeting it at the average working American, whereas Rivian targeted their vehicle at the average rich American. They're different people.
Yeah.
So Ford is under a lot more price pressure.
My God, are you still
Ford
talking?
Geniusly did was they decided to sell with it a home energy system and a home EV charger. That means it takes 2 days to charge your truck. So the clear failing in that, when I asked him, well, who else did you speak to about your home energy system? He said no one. They spoke to one company, and because he actually phrased it like this, that because Ford is run by bean counters, they just decided it would go for the cheapest one. So they basically have a home energy system that has minimal battery backup and can't charge an EV quickly.
Right.
So they went to the trouble of spending millions of pounds developing that car and didn't think about how you would actually charge it. But it does have vehicle to grid. The question is why, and when I asked him why, he went, well, if you have a power cut, then you can still make your dinner. Was actually his response. Which I think is probably a good time to come to the letters.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Agree.
Spice it up.
So look, it is actually quite a long letter.
It is a long one.
So apologies for the length of the letter. Right? But she's referred to us, Lucy, from Brighton.
Lucy from Brighton.
Lucy the lesbian.
She's referred to us as VoltsMonster Sparks.
Sparks?
Yeah. Who's Sparky?
Who knows?
It's definitely not him.
Could be. Look at the hair that's sparky.
Yeah.
What, he looks like he's been sparked.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, let's get cracked to this, right?
That's the look you're going for. Spiky, mate. It's looking good.
Yeah.
So-
visuals.
I know, man. Mine is looking good. Look, it's coming back. It is
Yeah,
coming back.
it
Get a
will
room,
grow-
you two. Come
It
on.
will
is
grow
growing
back
back.
eventually.
It is growing back, yeah. You know.
And then you can be curly and have your ginger afro.
Yeah, I know. Lucky me.
Anyway, look, you're in for a treat. It says that here,
Oh,
right? I've been a VM subscriber for 2 years,
Wow.
yeah.
We like you, Lucy.
and I love the new letter section. So, obviously, if you like what we're doing, like, subscribe, press the bell. You can see more of Virgil not saying very much, the pirate laughing at lesbian jokes,
By the sound of it.
and him referring to his gonads.
Yeah.
But anyway, so obviously from a loving subscriber. So thank you, Lucy. This is quite something, right? But she says, let me tell you about my latest escapade, which can only happen to someone like me, a proud LGBT lass from Brighton, with a penchant for... When I said the word penchant, I know what you were thinking. Electric vehicles, and apparently dramatic toilet experiences. The last of which left me with my fashionably cliched dungarees attached to a lamppost at 3 a.m. That's not actually the story, but she obviously has incidents with her dungarees.
Yeah.
So there I was, cruising along Brighton seafront. When she says cruising, I'm not sure if that means looking for a hookup.
Yeah.
That's anyway. On my way back from London in my beloved EV, feeling as green as the Pavilion Gardens, I decided to charge at a rapid charger as my Steed started blinking its low warning battery like it was at a rave. Not to panic, I found a glow stick. Is that a euphemism? Because obviously you know she's going for a long wait.
Yeah.
And pulled over by some stroke of luck, or so I thought, it was next to a public toilet. The good news is my Starbucks pumpkin cinnamon oats latte had gone right through me.
Which way? What, shits or?
She doesn't specify.
No, that's the problem.
I assume she's going to the toilet, so that hasn't actually happened yet.
Yeah.
Brilliant, I thought. Kill two birds with one stone. Obviously not vegan. I hopped out, plugged in my car, and then thought, why not charge my phone too? Apparently, in this, some toilets have phone chargers in them.
Why?
Well, it's Brighton, right? Says it all, doesn't it? I mean, a modern woman must always be full of charge, mustn't she? That's what I say to my wife all the time. So there I was in the loo, phone plugged in, when I heard a click that didn't sound too friendly. The door opened about 3 inches and jammed. I was sat on the loo, Nick Akimbo, stuck in the toilet of all places. My phone and car happily charging away, and me, I was like a caged bird, albeit less poetic setting than my pants around my ankles. I tried everything to escape, including a MacGyver-esque effort. Who's MacGyver?
MacGyver was a 60s detective, wasn't he? With always,
How old is this woman?
always had a gadget.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, MacGyver-esque effort involving. That sounds a bit like Inspector Gadget. Anyway, go gadget.
Dildo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you fell for it, didn't you? They are so predictable. Right. MacGyver-esque effort involving a loo roll and my shoe. Well, obviously that would be soft shoes. I even attempted to bribe the door with promises of oiling its hinges. Is that a euphemism as well? But no, it was having none of it. I started to feel like I was in a sitcom. I tried everything. Sorry, I'm reading from the wrong place. After what felt like an eternity, which was probably about 20 or 30 minutes, a kind soul, drawn by my muffled pleas or perhaps my off-key singing of ABBA hits, came to my rescue. They managed to jimmy open the door and I stepped out, greeted by the sun and the slightly bemused, gorgeous face of my rescuer. My EV and phone were both charged. I don't know what they were charging. But my dignity, well, that was stuck somewhere between the toilet seat and the jammed door. I thanked my rescuer, who chuckled and said, "Only in Brighton, eh?" I couldn't agree more, she was extremely hot. We exchanged numbers, so there is a bright side.
There you go.
Right? The question, as we've said, we will solve your problems, right? The question is, should I go on a date with someone I met in a public toilet is the first part of the question. And the second part, is this a good omen and what should I tell my mother about how we met? Virgil, this is right up your street. So
yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would prefer that over Tinder. You know, like nowadays the being standard sort of meets your partner.
So as opposed to swipe right,
yeah,
you move the door to the right.
And, yeah, all that. Yeah, no, I think if it's better than Tinder, it's worth doing.
If it's better than Tinder, it's worth doing. And the mother question?
I think, I think, I don't know. I don't know her mother, do I? I don't know her mother, so it could be. I mean, is she lesbian as well?
Basically, just don't bother with it. It's weird. Don't bother with it. You don't have to explain it to your parents. Just leave it. It's a bit strange. So I'll just get on.
Sorry, don't bother going on the date.
No, don't bother at all. No.
So don't even go on the date.
No, don't bother. Why would you go on a date with someone that you met at a public toilet?
Yeah, but they are in Brighton.
I know
this is normal.
I get that. But you can't be that desperate. So just like think about yourself, work on yourself, and just keep your head down. I wouldn't.
I mean, to be fair, the standardised nowadays, most people go back to when they pop a question and get engaged. They normally go back to the first place they met, don't they? So that would be a bit of an awkward
Yeah, one that'd be awkward in two. I just think that it's just a bit
Down
like
on one knee.
it's a bit strange. I mean, why would you?
Yeah, what sort of ring would you be offering? No.
Type of person that you'd meet in a
But
public toilet.
they're lesbians.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the rings don't come into it.
No. Yeah.
Maybe.
Or they do.
I don't know.
I don't know.
would
Do they?
I'd firmly suggest just not bothering. To be honest.
So don't do anything.
No.
It's better than Tinder.
So-
So that's a summary that a public meeting exam in a public toilet is better than Tinder.
Yeah.
And Mark, pirate advice
I think
on your deserted
I think
island.
it's just like there's an intervention there for a reason. I think it was meant to happen. You know.
So you believe in like godly fate?
I wouldn't say godly, but fate. Then yeah,
Okay.
something obviously brought the two of them together there. So yeah, I
Well,
like it. Go for it, Lucy.
good. Well done.
Like
So
fate.
I think overall, the sentiment, apart from Harvey, is
Yeah, because I can't. That's good advice that you should follow. Really, you know, I think you should follow it.
absolutely
But
go see her, get laid, move on, and maybe you won't have to tell your mother.
There you go.
yeah.
There you go. Everyone's
the,
happy.
Is that the summary?
Yeah, I think that's loosey peasy.
But the obviously breaking news there is public toilets are better than Tinder. So if you see Virgil on the front page of your local newspaper having been found in a public toilet in some compromising position,
Let's give me
don't be surprised.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It is what it is.
So moving on.
Yeah, let's get some Mark's story. Let's go to his
So Mark's stories, actually, for a pirate, they're very piratey.
There is
And for the first time, it's not a motorbike. It's actually a
so this is an electric
electric outboard.
A startup French manufacturer called Temo. Or
You
Temo.
love your Frenchies, don't you?
Interesting enough, when I was googling their name, for some reason, Google Translate came up with Spanish to English, and Spanish Temo translated to English means fear.
Fair.
Fear, as in afraid.
Oh, afraid.
Yeah, fear,
Oh.
yeah.
Fear.
Yeah.
So you should be in
You
fear
should
of
be in
this.
fear of this, but this is.
They obviously need a better branding agency.
Temo have had 6 million injected into them from a US finance company to basically expand their market to the US. This comes literally a day after the Temo story, in that Torqeedo, who was one of the largest electric moteboard manufacturers, outboard manufacturers, has been acquired by Yamaha. Just goes to show, I think, that the market, certainly on the marine side, is shifting very rapidly towards electric. So especially with somebody like Yamaha as one of the major manufacturers of outboards or traditional ice outboards. They made an acquisition of Torqeedo, and Torqeedo were doing quite well and growing, very well, and growing globally, and obviously dominating the market, primarily for the smaller.
Yeah,
Torqeedo
Torqeedo outboards are little, aren't they?
Little
So-
tiny things.
and they carry little batteries that are about this size.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see that Yamaha's made that acquisition. So I think they're going to be looking for more the mid-range outboards, developing electronic versions of that. Be interested to see how the charging infrastructure goes on these, because most of the smaller units tend to be AC charging. They will either have batteries which you pull out and take away and charge them portably, charge them elsewhere. But on obviously larger outboards, that's not going to be a problem. So it'd be good to see if they develop a consistent and a universal charging method across all electric outboards.
Boring.
Our advice on that to anyone, because we've been involved with a little issue with Volvo plant, is in Volvo's smallest plant uses a 48 volt connector, the same thing you get on a forklift. But what Volvo have failed to understand is that no one uses electric forklifts on building sites.
Yeah.
So if you're on a building site and you want a forklift, you generally buy one rent one that's diesel or gas, because of the performance.
When will this nightmare end?
And obviously access to electrical supplies on sites which don't have electrical supplies is obviously rubbish. So there are some companies like ZPN Energy who have mobile charging facilities that can be deposited on the site. But our advice to Yamaha is CCS charging, CCS DC charging. Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it.
Do it.
Do not go down the mistake of NACS or anything else. Just go CCS. It's simple, it's cheap, does the job. Don't do Temo because it's complicated and it's Japanese and hideously expensive.
And there's already that global adoption of it. Well, companies like Aqua Superpower, who I think they've just installed one in the US in what was it, Los Angeles? I think it was.
Yeah,
last
they've
week. They
installed a
just
few.
installed
So
one,
Aqua Superpower use a CCS connector on their DC chargers, which is a good example. We need EV charging infrastructure to be ubiquitous.
Yeah, definitely.
We shouldn't have different systems. It would be helpful if it became one. In the same way, over time, why have you highlighted Torquedo?
I was just thinking it sounds like a subsidiary of Torpedos.
Sounds a bit like a mix of Torquay and Pedo.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
Well, there's an ironic thing, isn't it?
it is, yeah, it is.
We won't get into that.
Breaking news story.
Yeah.
Well, there is a breaking news story. I don't know whether we should include this. So in the editing of this, decide very carefully whether it's included.
Josh.
Unfortunately, Torbay Council has a contract to house paedophiles.
Bloody hell.
And
Bloody
I couldn't possibly say how I know that.
Weird, huh?
Anyway, the good news about Torquedo is mainstream outboard manufacturers taking it on. So that's good news.
Good news all round. And it's interesting to see that adoption in the marine industry, isn't it? How slow and how cumbersome the automotive industry was, but
there's less vested interest in,
there's less
in
vested.
both.
And interestingly enough, I had a conversation with not 2 years ago with a very well-known premium rib manufacturer in the southwest, and said to them,
What do you mean rib shack? Ribeye.
Ribeye, that's the one.
The one that rhymes with steak.
Steak.
Obviously you're allergic to that, aren't you?
I am indeed. But I had a conversation with their chief of marketing or development, I think it was, and said, what are you doing about electric boats and the adoption and sort of being a market leader there? And they just said, nah, it'll never happen. So here you go, guys.
Clearly is.
Yeah.
Cool. Any more stories?
I think that's all of them.
That's all of them.
That's the ball.
Yeah.
So we are at the end of today's episode.
We are.
In summary, if you meet someone in a public toilet, it's better than Tinder.
Go for it.
If you're a mainstream outboard manufacturer, don't do anything else other than CCS.
Definitely.
And if you're 20 years old, you basically hate everything, including anyone you meet. Is that fair?
Depends. Does depend.
See, you can't even give me a straight answer. But overall, the advice is... What is the advice? The advice is... Is the advice?
This is the advice.
No, the advice is... if you meet online, it's worse than if you meet
In a public toilet.
in a public toilet. And the consensus is you should tell your mother. And on that note, that brings to the end this episode of VoltsMonster.
That was very professional.
Yeah.
If you like what we do, right? If you like what we do,
Please
you need to like, subscribe,
Yeah.
and
Right into
Notification
us.
bell.
press the
Yeah.
notification bell.
Ding dong.
Yeah, right.
Ding
into
dong.
us.
Ding dong.
Yeah.